Welcome to the Endo Belly Girl Podcast. I'm your host, Alyssa Chavez. I'm a nutritional therapy practitioner and restorative wellness practitioner on a mission to change the way that we support women with endometriosis. Endo is a full-body disease that impacts your mind, body, and spirit in countless ways that aren't often addressed the way that women truly deserve. We are here to talk about all of it. Please keep in mind that the content of this show has been created for educational purposes only and should never be used as a replacement for medical diagnosis or treatment. Hello, my friend, and welcome back to the Endo Belly Girl Podcast. So, today's episode, and actually this is going to end up being a series of episodes because I decided it was just way too much to try to pack into one episode because there's so much to say. We are going to talk about minerals, which is so exciting because that means that your dear friend Alyssa over here gets to nerd out. And I love doing that. So hopefully you love to nerd out with me. If you don't love to nerd out, that's okay. You'll still get to learn some fun facts about minerals, in particular magnesium today. Spoiler alert, that is our mineral that we're going to be talking about today. Now, I think it's probably extra important to talk about minerals in the summertime. As the time that I'm recording this, it is July. And it is very hot out, at least where I am. And when it's hot out, that means that we sweat more. And when we sweat, we actually lose minerals through our sweat. So we need to be replenishing them and be aware of that. So like I said, this is going to end up being a multi-part episode. There's so many amazing minerals that support our bodies for everybody, but I think it's especially important to talk about with endometriosis because minerals really impact pretty much everything in our bodies. Minerals impact your blood sugar balance. Minerals impact your digestion, your energy production, your hydration, your hormone health, your mood, your thyroid function, basically everything. Okay? Your minerals are the spark plugs of your body. They're the things that make everything else go and function. Your minerals are building blocks. Every cell in your body actually requires minerals for things like energy production, hormone signaling, enzyme production and signaling, and more. Now, what are minerals exactly? You might be wondering if you maybe don't read about minerals quite as often as I do, which is understandable. So some of the common minerals that we are going to hear about just in day-to-day life, you might hear about magnesium, zinc, calcium, sodium, potassium. Those are kind of some of the main ones. And we're going to talk about why all of these are important and how we can best to support them. But today, we are going to really focus in on one of my favorite minerals, magnesium. So we're going to take a look today at why it's important, what it does in your body, what it looks like when you're deficient, and how to make sure that you're actually getting enough, because that's something that I would say most people probably are not at the moment. So let's dive in. Let's start by taking a look at why magnesium is important. So magnesium is one of those crucial minerals. It's one of the essential minerals in our bodies. And when you hear the word essential, that means that your body can't produce it on its own. It needs to come in through dietary sources or supplements to your body. That's, the same idea. It's coming in, you're ingesting it. It's coming into your body. Okay? And magnesium actually supports over 300 different processes in your body. It is also, like I mentioned, a mineral that so many people are deficient in, and that is so important for endo warriors. Why are so many people deficient in magnesium? Well, number one is because our soil is so much more depleted of minerals than it once was, right? Just the way that we grow our crops these days, our food is basically grown more for efficiency than it is for the health of the actual, vegetables and fruits and things that we're growing. So because of that, the farming practices, at least that the larger conventional farms are practicing, deplete the soils from nutrients. It doesn't mean that's the case for everybody, because there are farmers out there who are doing amazing work, who are doing things like regenerative farming and sustainable farming practices. They're rotating crops and maybe even adding minerals to the soil, doing some wonderful things to create some beautiful, healthy vegetables and fruits that are full of nutrients. But that's not going to be the case for the most part. You kind of have to look for those. So what happens is that when our soils are depleted of minerals, the produce that comes out of that soil is also depleted of minerals. So even though if you may be eating lots of fruits and vegetables, you might still not be getting a ton of minerals. That's largely where our minerals come from. They come from produce, especially our vegetables, and they come from water as well. There's minerals in our water, and we'll talk about that. But that's one of the main reasons that many people are so depleted, is just that it's very, very challenging to actually get enough magnesium from our food these days, which is kind of nuts. The other reason for that is just that we use magnesium for so many things in your body that we can end up burning through it really quickly. So even though you might be getting a lot of magnesium, you might be also burning through it very quickly. So, for example, we actually use magnesium for the stress response, right? Everything that your body does requires nutrients of some kind. And so the stress response, which we actually just talked about very recently in episode 45 and 46, we were talking about the stress response and how all of that works in your body. And magnesium is one of the nutrients that your body uses a whole lot of to create that stress response. And so if you're having a lot of stress, either external stress or internal stress, that can end up leading to very low magnesium, which can then end up leading to symptoms of low magnesium, which we're going to talk about in just a little bit. That is also true with inflammation. Inflammation also burns through magnesium quite quickly. And we know that inflammation is an issue with endometriosis. If you have endometriosis, there is some inflammation going on. That's pretty much, it's an inflammatory condition. So we know that there's some inflammation happening in your body. If you're experiencing a lot of symptoms like pain and fatigue, those are some of the most common symptoms of inflammation. So coming back to that magnesium, what does magnesium do in your body? I won't have time to tell you every single thing that magnesium is involved in your body. But some of the major areas that magnesium plays a role include your bone health, your hormone health, your mitochondrial function, which is super important because that's where energy is produced. So if you're struggling with fatigue, magnesium actually can be really important for that. Blood sugar, inflammation, detoxification, your nervous system, your mood. Magnesium is also required for the activation of vitamin D, and magnesium is required for muscle relaxation. Hello, menstrual cramps, right? If you're getting a lot of cramping, a lot of pain during your periods, feels like those muscles are just cramping, that can also be a sign of magnesium deficiency in your body. Speaking of symptoms of low magnesium, let's talk about that, because I think that that's something that's important to know. There's so much, once you learn to really understand your body and the signs and symptoms that it's showing you, you can actually really learn a lot about what's going on in your body. So symptoms of low magnesium can include things like anxiety, arrhythmias, PMS, having a low, poor mood, depletion and burnout, painful periods, things that so many endo warriors can definitely relate to. Now, I think it's important to note that there are some things that are kind of early signs of magnesium deficiency, like your body might just be starting to get some deficiency in magnesium, and that can include things like fatigue, anxiety, and even weakness in your muscles. Whereas when that magnesium deficiency becomes a little bit more progressed, that can look like migraines, constipation, PMS, painful periods, muscle spasms, it can start to develop a little bit more. So just something that's important to note. One other just fun fact that I think is fun to know and be aware of is that chocolate cravings can actually be a sign of magnesium deficiency. So if you're one of those people, I'm raising my hand over here because this is me a lot, that craves chocolate, especially maybe right around your period, is super common. It may be that you're craving that chocolate because you need more magnesium, because chocolate is actually very high in magnesium. So there you go. Our bodies are very intuitive and intelligent. They know what we need, and that's why they send us to that pantry looking for chocolate. So there you go. So we're starting to see why magnesium is so important for endometriosis. Now, let's take a look at how we can make sure that we get enough magnesium in your body. So I always like to take a food first approach, right? Because I always say you can't out-supplement a poor diet, right? So we want to be thinking, whenever we're thinking about any nutrient or anything that we're trying to get more of in your body, the very first thing that we want to think of is what foods are rich in that particular nutrient. So in this case, we're talking about magnesium. What foods are rich in magnesium? Well, we already talked about chocolate. Cacao is definitely rich in magnesium, so that's a good one. You can also think about things like nuts, seeds, beans. Many vegetables are really rich in magnesium. So those are some of the good food sources. However, like I mentioned before, it can actually be difficult to get enough magnesium through food these days, in part because our soils are depleted, our food sources are a little bit depleted of minerals, and also just because we may be burning through that magnesium really quickly, and you may just need more than you're able to get in through your diet. But I still want you to think food first. That's something that's super important because the food that we eat impacts so much about our bodies. Okay, but that being said, I would actually say that magnesium is probably the supplement or one of the at least in the top 3 supplements that I recommend to my clients that I work with because it is something that so many people are deficient and really could use more of. Now, I think we really need to touch base on the fact that when you're supplementing with magnesium, there are different forms, and knowing which form you're taking in is really important because they can impact your body in different ways. So there are certain forms of magnesium that can impact your bowels and certain forms that are going to be better for other things. So there are forms of magnesium that actually have kind of a laxative effect, which can be helpful if you need that, and we'll talk about that in a second, but may not be helpful if you are maybe struggling with loose stools and diarrhea. So all things to think about. Now, when we're talking about the different forms of magnesium, it's all magnesium. What we're really looking at, the different forms, it refers to what the magnesium is bound to, right? Because you have the actual mineral magnesium, but in order for your body to use it, it has to be bound to something. And that's the part that starts to make the difference in your body as far as how well you're able to absorb it and use it, and also the impact that it has on your body. Now, I'm going to kind of go through some different forms of magnesium. I know I am usually listening to podcast episodes while I'm multitasking. I'm out on a walk, or I'm driving, or I'm cooking dinner or something. So if you are doing that right now, don't stress about trying to write this all down. I will link in the show notes. I will put a link to the website page for this episode where you'll be able to find all of this info. I'll have it all written out for you there so you can see all of that and you don't have to stress about writing this down. Okay, so let's dive in. Forms of magnesium. Now, I'm not going to cover every possible form today. There's quite a few, but I am going to keep it to the ones that you'll see most often and the ones that I typically recommend using for people, just so that you have a little bit of awareness when you're looking at supplement labels. So, first up on that list is magnesium citrate. Now, magnesium citrate is a very common form of magnesium. I see it often. The magnesium there is bound to citric acid. And this particular form of magnesium is often used for constipation because it has that laxative effect that I was talking about. Now, that is not great if you, like I said, already have some loose stools or diarrhea going on. Magnesium citrate is probably not going to be your friend. And honestly, even for constipation, it can be really helpful for the short term if you're just like, I am struggling and I need to poop now. Magnesium citrate can be really helpful. People who find that they struggle with constipation on and off and, haven't found a full resolution to that, that can be a good thing to keep on hand if you need it. It's not a great long-term solution, though, because it doesn't really get to the root of why you are having constipation in the first place. So that's something that is important to be aware of. Okay, next up on the list is magnesium chloride. Now, that form can also be used for constipation, but it is especially helpful for menstrual cramps. Menstrual cramps too, but muscle cramps kind of more generally. And I see actually magnesium chloride often in topical forms, which I really like actually for people who are more sensitive and find that magnesium just impacts their bowels more than is comfortable for them. I really like using some of the topical forms of magnesium. So that can be things like lotions, gels, oils, even Epsom salts, which you can just pour in a nice hot bath and soak in it because you can actually absorb that magnesium through your skin as well. And that can be a really good option if you don't tolerate it well orally. Although I will say sometimes just changing the form of magnesium can be really helpful for that too. Next up is magnesium malate. This one has a less laxative effect, so it's easier on the bowels than some of those forms that we just talked about. Magnesium malate is often used for fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue, but it can be a good source of magnesium to turn to. Another form that I do really like is magnesium L-threonate, and that one is really important for brain health. So I know it's something that has even been recommended these days for, mental health, anxiety, depression, even as far as things like Alzheimer's and dementia. It has been recommended for things like that. So it's a really good support, especially if you are struggling with anxiety and or depression, things like that, and you need a little extra support. That magnesium L-threonate is really great. Last, but certainly not least, because this is the one that I actually recommend most often to my clients and I use myself on a daily basis, is magnesium glycinate. So this is magnesium that is bound to glycine, which is an amino acid. It is very bioavailable. It is easy on your bowels. So if you find that you don't tolerate magnesium well, magnesium glycinate can be a good option. I really like it. And it also has a lot of benefits. So it's really supportive for sleep. It's supportive for muscle cramps. It's also supportive for anxiety and depression, for period symptoms. So you can see why it's kind of a go-to for endometriosis. I really like that particular form of magnesium. I would say that that's the one I recommend the most, is that magnesium glycinate. So something to consider there. All right, so I would say that pretty much covers magnesium as far as the benefits of magnesium, the signs of deficiency, how to actually get enough in your body. There's many ways to do that, right? Through your food, through supplements, through topical sources of magnesium. I really love magnesium. I feel like it makes a huge difference in so many areas. Actually, fun fact, part of the reason that I decided to record this episode right now, one is that I've kind of been taking a deep dive on minerals lately. I really love continuing education. I love to learn. It's fun for me. I've decided that when I'm, wealthy and have tons of money, I'm probably just going to dump it all into more education for myself because I genuinely just love learning. And so minerals is something I've really been taking a deep dive on lately because there's so much to learn. But fun fact is that amongst that, I actually ran out of my magnesium. And, life has just been busy and I haven't gotten around to ordering more. So I've just been out for probably 2 weeks now, which is not great for me, but kind of great for you because you get to learn from me. And I have honestly found, because I have actually supplemented with magnesium a little bit on and off, but mostly on for quite some time now. And I've kind of varied that between supplemental magnesium and some topical magnesiums. But and Epsom salt baths, not right now because it's July and it's really hot. But in the winter months, I really enjoy taking a nice hot bath with some Epsom salt. It feels great, especially when you've got muscles cramping, or just can be very soothing and supportive of sleep and all of that good stuff. But I have noticed in the time that I've run out of my magnesium, I have felt a lot more anxious. I have had some cramping. I have actually even had some headaches. I've had more difficulty sleeping. I felt more tired. There's been a few things happening, and it might not all be from the magnesium. It's not like that's the one and only factor going on in my life right now, but I do definitely feel like it makes an impact, because I know sometimes it can be a little hard to tell with certain supplements. Like, is it really making a difference? I don't know. But I will say, just speaking from my own personal experience, that I feel a whole lot better when I have enough magnesium in my body. And I actually take a fairly high dosage of magnesium because I feel like it is super helpful for me. So that's just my 2 cents. That's been my experience. I have found magnesium to be super helpful, and I hope that it is for you as well. So I did want to note a couple of things before we finish up for today. One of those is that minerals don't work independently from each other in your body. So we talked about magnesium today. That was really our topic that we took a deep dive into, which I'm glad that we did, because obviously I had a lot to say about magnesium. But I think it's important to note that even magnesium, even though it's super important, we can really use it in our body, it doesn't work independently from the other minerals. They all work with each other, right? So, for example, when I work with clients, I really like to run a test called HTMA, which is Hair Trace Mineral Analysis. It's a great test, and you can learn so much from it. I've run one a couple of times on myself now. I try to repeat that one every so often, and I like to use it on clients. And one thing that's really interesting with that, so if you're not familiar with this particular test, I think I've talked about it a little bit on the podcast before, but basically you just mail into the lab a little sample of hair, and it tests for mineral status, because your hair kind of shows a little bit of history on that, right? And can give us like a 3-month look at what your mineral status looks like. It's super interesting. And it allows us to look both at individual mineral status, including magnesium. So you can see magnesium and calcium and sodium and potassium and copper and manganese and all the individual minerals. But it also looks at some of the mineral ratios. So not just how much of each individual mineral you have going on, but what the ratios look like. And that part is really important. We're going to keep talking about that as well as I go through this little series I'm creating on minerals. But for example, just to kind of give you a little bit of a glance at that today, there's a ratio it looks at between calcium and magnesium. And that gives us some information on your blood sugar, because magnesium sensitizes your cells to insulin, and at the same time, calcium helps to stimulate the release of insulin. And that helps to create that blood sugar balance, right? Depending on whether you need to raise your blood sugar levels or lower your blood sugar levels. So it's kind of like this little dance between the two minerals. So we don't want to have a ton of magnesium and no calcium, but we also don't want to have a ton of calcium and no magnesium, right? We want to have a balance between the two so they can each do their job. We also look at the sodium and magnesium ratio, which helps to give us a glance at the adrenal health in your body, which we had been just talking about adrenal health the last 2 episodes prior to this. So if you want to learn more about that, you can go back to those episodes 40, Actually, I think it was 44, 45. I think I said the wrong ones earlier. 44 and 45 were the adrenal episodes. We were talking about stress and endometriosis and adrenal health and cortisol and all of the things. So you can go back and give those a listen should you be interested in those and how all that works. But the minerals impact your adrenals. Your sodium and magnesium ratio impacts the health of your adrenals. So something that's important to be thinking about. I've been super into that test lately. It gives us so much information about mineral status, so many interesting insights. And the cool thing is, too, it's one of the most inexpensive functional tests. Because some of the functional tests that I use, I really love, but they can be, $300-$400. Whereas the HTMA is like less than $100. So it's a more inexpensive test. It's a good place to start, especially if you don't have a huge budget for functional testing. It can really give you a good idea. Now, because of those mineral ratios, I'm generally not a big fan of supplementing with a single mineral for an extended period of time. I would say that magnesium, not that it's an exception to that rule, because I still recommend if you're going to be supplementing for an extended period of time that you're kind of keeping an eye on things and maybe going back and retesting and seeing how things are going. But I do think that that is something to consider, is just that we want to support the individual minerals, but we also don't want to knock other minerals out of balance, because some of them kind of work antagonistically to each other, where when one is high, it can push the other one low and vice versa. So just something to be aware of, because I don't know that that is, super common knowledge. So I want to make sure I throw that out there. Okay, my friend, I hope this is helpful for you. I hope you learned a little bit about magnesium and how it can help to support your body. Truly, I think it can make a big difference in the lives of endo warriors. So I hope that that is super helpful for you. Like I said, this will be a multi-part episode. Today we talked about magnesium, but I do want to talk about zinc and sodium and potassium and some of these other minerals and how they can impact your body. Some of these things that are kind of lesser known, but that are really, really helpful for endo warriors. So if you want to make sure that you don't miss those episodes as they are released, go into the podcasting app that you're using, if you're on Apple or Spotify or whatever other podcasting app that you use, and make sure that you hit the subscribe button. So that way you will be notified when the next episode comes out and you won't miss it. And while you're at it, hop into the show notes. Make sure that you download my Endo Diet Guide. It's free. You can find it linked there in the show notes. And that way, if you're really thinking about nutrients and dietary status, you have a lovely resource for you that I know will be super helpful for you on your endo journey. Okay, my friend, I hope you enjoy. You have the most wonderful day, and I will catch you all next week. Much love. Thank you so much for joining me today, my friend. If you loved what you heard, be sure to share with a friend and subscribe so that you can keep coming back for more. If you are ready to take the next step towards getting to the root cause of your endo symptoms like endo belly, pain, fatigue, and so much more, you need to download my free ultimate guide to building your own endometriosis diet. You can find the link in the show notes or at www.endobellygirl.com. Until next time, my friend.